Mr. Golub, this is, of course, this is unprecedented in American history. A former president of the United States of America has been criminally indicted and is presently under arrest as we speak in the Manhattan court.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's historical and it's extremely sad that this is taking place. The next big news, maybe in an hour or two or three, I'm not sure, I don't think any of us are sure, is that the actual charges will be unveiled. Right now, we just know that it involves Stormy Daniels, alleged hush money payments to her, then in effect covering those up. But there have been scattered reports that there may be 20 charges or 30 different charges in the actual indictment of former President Trump. And if that's the case, it's conceivable that there may be other things he's charged with. He certainly has been involved with certain other alleged financial crimes that go way beyond this. But I want to emphasize that's just a guess, that's just speculation on my part. We'll know much more certainly not too long from now when the actual charges are unveiled to the press and to the general public.
Absolutely, indeed, because this is very baffling. You know, for people who are watching this from outside the United States of America, if someone is charged, is criminally indicted, then we would expect that those charges would be made public. But here, in a very interesting procedure that reportedly is being followed, the charges have not been made public, and we expect the charges to be made public in some time from now, once the charges are read out by the judge to Donald Trump once he appears in the courtroom in front of him. But Mr. Golub, I want you to weigh in on another big question, because this is a case that is dividing America right down the middle between the Democrats and the Republicans. A lot of people on the Republican side, including Donald Trump's defense team, in fact, say that this is not a case that has any legal merit, and it is nothing short of a political witch hunt which the Democrats are carrying out against Donald Trump.
I disagree with that. I think there's a sound basis to bring this case. It's true that this case is unusual in terms of the combination of charges or potential charges involved, falsifying financial records on the one hand and allegedly violating federal campaign laws on the other. So a state charge on the other, federal, that is national law, on the other hand. However, there have been analogous cases, not exactly the same, that have been brought in New York City, dozens of them, not involving federal campaign laws, but this a combination of charges. And more importantly, Donald Trump has brought this on himself, at least allegedly has, by virtue of, in this case, having an affair with another woman and then hushing it up through these payments, and more broadly,
Mr. Golub, I just want to interject there. I just want to butt in there. To be fair to Donald Trump, having an affair is not illegal, and also, one would think that this is an affair that Stormy Daniels claims happened in 2006 between her and someone who is going to be the President of the United States 10 years later. She says that this was a consensual affair that they had. She also goes on to state that she was paid a sum of $130,000 by one of the individuals in Donald Trump's team in 2016 to not talk about it in public. Legally speaking, is it wrong for an individual to pay money to another to keep something a secret about an affair that just happened between them? There's a question that I want to ask you.
That's a great point and a great question. Yes, it is under these circumstances. He's not being charged for having the affair or for even giving her money. What he's being charged with is falsifying, or what we think he's being charged with when the charges become clear, is for falsifying financial records of his business, and then also
then that would be a different case. Mr. Golub, sorry for interjecting you, because if the case is about falsifying, his financial documents, if it is about, some kind of a financial fraud of taking money from somewhere for a different purpose and then, paying it off to Stormy Daniels, then that would be a case that probably the legal experts could pursue on. But just by virtue of saying that because he had an affair with Stormy Daniels back in 2006, and he did not want her to come and talk about it when he was running for the presidency 10 years later, and because he paid money for her, that, strictly speaking, is on very thin legal grounds.
In and of itself, the way you framed it is correct. Simply having an affair, then paying her not to talk about it is one thing, and he wouldn't be charged for that. But again, it's falsifying the records. And then the related campaign finance violations are a potentially serious crime, punishable by up to 4 years in jail. It does, right. The combination of those charges does constitute a felony. And also, this is not a legal point, but let's put this in a broader context. We're not talking about small change here in terms of the impact on the country. If he did this, then it was to try to affect a general election for the President of the United States. Not important, not crucial in terms of the legal analysis, but crucial in terms of the importance of this chain of events, or again, this alleged chain of events.
Absolutely, indeed. Now, it remains to be seen as to what, the investigation, of course, throws up, and what is the source of that money, $130,000, which he paid to Stormy Daniels. This is what she says that has happened. But the broader question is this. Donald Trump's team says that this is a political witch hunt and it is a case without legal merit. Do you see this to be a case that has been brought up at all and which is a motivated one? Or do you think that this is just law that is taking its own course?
It's law taking its own course. And also I'd like to bear in mind that the district attorney in New York who's bringing this case is not simply some lawyer who got elected to this post. This is a former federal prosecutor with loads of experience in terms of white-collar crime. He's declined, at least as far as we know, to prosecute Donald Trump for some other alleged financial matters. We'll find out in the indictment. But this is a valid case he's bringing. We'll find out more as the actual case unfolds, first
Absolutely.
With the charges. But this is standing on solid legal ground, brought by someone who has very solid legal credentials.
All right. No one questions the legal credentials of the public attorney there. But as you said, at this moment, we still don't know what the charges are. We still do not know what Donald Trump is going to be charged with. Everything that is appearing in the media is all just speculation at this point, because it's baffling, as I've been saying, that we still don't know that a man who's been criminally indicted and his charges have not been made public, because one would think that the charges that are being leveled against Donald Trump would have been made public automatically once he's been indicted, but that's not the case, because what is now going to happen is that the charges will be read out by the judge when Donald Trump appears in front of him. But Mr. Golub, I want to ask you a larger political question about, what is happening in America at this moment. There are polls which indicate that nearly about 85% of the Republicans, in fact, don't think Donald Trump has done anything wrong. Nearly about 50% of 50 to 60% of the people, they are saying that they do not think that he's done something wrong in the hush payments case. As a political analyst, how do you look at what some of these, polls are throwing up in terms of how America is divided on the issue of a case where the charges haven't yet even been made public?
Well, I think it's a normal procedure, actually. We have a sense of what he's being charged with. He was indicted, but the full nature of the specific charges will come out in this hearing today or shortly afterwards. That's not so unusual, actually. Right. In terms of the country being split, in the broader political question that you correctly raised, I think the majority of American people, as indicated by polling, have doubts about Donald Trump sufficiently to indicate, have doubts about his innocence, have doubts about his being not guilty. With regard to this and a number of other pending indictments, one other point regarding electoral misconduct, the January 6th insurrection and the like, one other related point that I want to get to is just circling back to basically agree with you in a way. It would have been ideal, both from the point of view of his political and legal opponents as well as his supporters, if he'd been indicted for another of these possible crimes, possible alleged crimes down the line, or excuse me, if that had happened first rather than this one. This is in some ways the most controversial and potentially the weakest case. But again, we don't know whether this will unfold. People are taking more seriously, or will take more seriously perhaps, the indictments against him that may come down for obstruction regarding confidential and even secret documents that he held onto, and for the electoral abuses that he's been accused of politically and may be accused of legally.
This my colleague Susan Tehrani is presently in front of the Manhattan Courthouse, and she's getting us all the updates as we speak. Susan, what are you picking up from in front of the Manhattan Courthouse from the visuals that we are looking at, that are being beamed across the world, that are being carried out, on virtually every global media network? We're seeing 3-4 policemen standing in front of an inner door of the Manhattan Courthouse as Donald Trump, we're given to understand, is inside the court. Tell us what's happening.
Yes, I see what you're seeing right now, and that's the scene that us that we're standing outside, we don't see that door. Actually, we're not privy to it, but what we see here is just a swarm of national and international media which has descended, which really signifies Donald Trump's personality. Where he goes, really the media and the news follows. I don't know if you can hear, but hovering above the courthouse is 2 or 3 helicopters. They're just standing, which is standard practice considering the fact that he's a high-profile former president entering this courthouse. The NYPD on full alert, security still very tight. But I will say those protests and counter-protests that were happening here across the park, the park that's across the courthouse, has subsided for the most part. Now, it is around 2:19 p.m. local time. Time has passed. I don't know if the demonstrators will come back, but a lot of the commotion has subsided since before Donald Trump entered the courthouse. Understandably, internet access, bandwidth is very spotty around here. That's no coincidence. But I think that law enforcement really is taking every measure possible to make sure that nothing goes wrong, because as we know, emotions run so high right now on both sides of the aisle, seeing the former president in a courthouse, really.
Absolutely, indeed. Susan, do continue to stay on with us. Mr. Golub, if I can come back to you, this is what the scene looks like. At this moment, we do not know what is happening inside of the courthouse. Donald Trump is inside of that courthouse. He is under arrest, but we expect that he will also secure a bail, because he also has a event that we're given to understand in Florida later this evening, where he'll be addressing his supporters. But Mr. Golub, tell us a bit about what it means per se for American politics. 2024 is still some time off. 2024 November, it's still at least about 18, 17 odd months away from now. But the politicking, even ahead of actual campaigning to begin, is now going to get really, really bitter and ugly, because Donald Trump will be convinced that this is a shoddy case, this is a political witch hunt, and he'll, of course, go to town to his supporters and he'll say that the Democrats tried to do him in with a legal case, and that is the reason why his supporters should rally behind him. Do you think this case can strengthen and unite the Republican base behind Donald Trump?
Oh, yes, definitely. Now, when we say the Republican base, there are exceptions to that rule. There are people within the Republican Party who think that Donald Trump, his overall conduct, and even in this case, it's been execrable, it's been condemnable. But generally, the Republican base probably will be energized by this. And, hold on to your hats, because this may well be only the first of a series of indictments coming down the road against Donald Trump. So they might be excited or again in his favor, or repulsed by these indictments even more. So yeah, I think it is intensifying some of the divisions. Having said that, I don't know if it's in the Republican Party's overall interest to see him nominated, because he may be a weaker candidate. a year from now, when the around when the general election candidate,
All right.
the race starts for the presidency between the Democrat and the Republican candidates.
All right, will be interesting to see as to how things, of course, pan out and how the American public, of course, perceives this very high-profile case. Unprecedented in American history. A former president of the United States of America is now arrested, and he's now inside that courtroom that you are looking for.